Hi, I'm Gretchen Spiker with the City of Topeka.
And I'm India Yarborough with the Greater Topeka Partnership.
The Topeka Talk podcast is back for Season 2 for more meaningful community conversations.
We've got a great lineup in store, and we're excited to have you along for the ride this season. Before getting into the show, we'd like to highlight our first ever Topeka Partnership podcast sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Compass Marketing and Advertising Partners. Compass Marketing and Advertising takes their clients through the entire marketing process, from defining a client's business strategy to designing their message in all formats to delivering that message to their target markets. For an agency that partners with your business to navigate new territory and chart paths to success, connect with Compass Marketing and Advertising Partners at weareyourcompass.com. Thank you, Compass, for supporting the Greater Topeka Partnership and Topeka Talk podcast. Now back to the show. Hey there, Topeka Talk listeners. As we round out Season 2 of the show, we're excited to bring you a 3-episode series that takes a look at those once-in-a-lifetime ARPA funds we've heard so much about since they were first announced nationally. It's been about a year since the announcement of which local projects would be receiving a portion of that funding, and over the next few episodes, we'll take a look at where the money is now, what projects have kicked off as a result of those funds, what key focus areas are they looking to address. We'll be diving into all that and more.
That's right, India. In 2022, the City of Topeka received just over $45.5 million as part of the American Rescue Plan Act, commonly known as ARPA. Topeka's governing body later approved setting aside $10 million to be allocated for social service programs in the Topeka area. The other, more than $35.5 million, was allocated to capital improvement projects.
To help us explore this topic a bit further, in the studio with us today is Topeka City Council member Spencer Duncan. Councilman Duncan represents Topeka's District 8. He also led the committee that developed the process for selecting and later awarding those local ARPA grants. Welcome, Spencer. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Welcome. Well, Spencer, let's begin with the big picture and go back to when the city first became aware that it was receiving these ARPA dollars. What was the approach you and the other governing body members decided to take when it came to how these dollars might be used or distributed? And why was it important to take that approach? Just help us set the stage here.
Sure. So I think we found out in 20 we were going to get some money, and I think we actually knew the amount late 20, early 21. There were several meetings with the entire governing body, all 10 members, of what they wanted to do with that. That total amount, as you said, was $45 million-ish. How much of that was going to go towards infrastructure, how much towards this process, and the final decision was that $10 million. They then sort of left it up to myself and the committee, which was council members Hannenager and Valdivia Alcala, to sort of then decide the process. They gave us a lot of leeway, which was both an honor and a little overwhelming at first, because that's a lot of pressure for $10 million into our community. But they did give us some parameters, and the biggest one was give it to where we have the areas of most need in our community and make sure it goes towards longevity. We want to make sure everyone understands these are one-time dollars. If you use it, you can't come back. There's not more after that. So those were kind of the two parameters they gave us, and then they sort of let us go from there, and we did. It took us a while. It was about a 6-7 month process that included developing what the application looked like. We wanted it to be simple but comprehensive. Those two things aren't always go together, but we wanted enough information from the groups to make sure that they qualified, but also we didn't want this to become as complicated as some federal government grant where they just have to fill out all this information and provide us all these details. We just wanted to know, step one, what is your project? And how do you expect to fulfill it? There was a second part to that, but step one was just tell us what it is. We had $10 million to give. We had almost 100 applications turned in that equated to about $40 million.
Wow. Far exceeded,
Yes. And then it was, okay, now we have to start making the cuts and getting to where we needed to go.
And if I recall correctly, you and the other committee members gave a charge to the applicants that said, look, we wish there was all of this money to go around. All of these are worthy causes. But if you have it in you to scale back some of your projects or take a look at the top dollar, and I think some of those bigger projects did scale back and really for the greater good so that we could still serve the purpose, but maybe not the whole.
They did. So our step one was we were able to trim maybe 20 applications and $10 million. So now we're down to, 85-ish applications and $30 million for $10 million. And that's because some of those didn't meet certain criteria we set. Like you had to at least been in existence 2 years. Some of those didn't meet that, or they really weren't established legally the correct way. So there was a portion that was easy to lop off. Not as much as would have been liked, I guess, in terms of getting it. So then that's when we went back and said, two things are going to happen. We're going to ask for follow-up information now, and we're challenging each of you to understand what we're faced with. $30 million, 85 applications. If you can make cuts, go back and look at it. And to their credit, yeah, I think they shaved another $10 million off, or 8 or so, which got us suddenly down to, believe it or not, almost a manageable $22 million or so in requests from that original. But then that actually is when it got really tough, because we then had to sit and make our own internal decisions. I do think one of the things we decided early on to do, which I think was good and is how it should be done regularly, is we didn't try to do any of this in executive session. We did it all in public. We did it with people sitting there watching us have our own discussion amongst ourselves, ask those folks questions, so that we could honestly look at people and say, you are a great project. This is a great idea, but it just doesn't meet these criteria. And some of those were there were a few projects that I would consider economic development projects, which are absolutely important to our community, but they weren't the top priorities and needs of the city of Topeka.
Or necessarily the spirit of ARPA, right?
Right.
Because you were also having to balance all these federal guidelines, which weren't always the easiest to interpret, if we're being honest. So what a balance and a tall task you and the committee members.
And that was another requirement. We are now in 2023. These dollars have to be committed. Like, not just we say we're going to spend it, but you have to have a contract in place or have spent the dollars by the end of 2024. Mm-hmm. And some projects, it turned out, as you talked to them more, said, well, we're still in the development phase. We're hoping it's a 5-year process. And we said, great, we don't have a 5-year process. We have a 3-year process. Others that were hard to turn down were ones who they wanted to pay for staff in child care centers. That was absolutely a need. And we did give dollars to child care centers, but we weren't going to give it to just pay for salaries, because in 3 years, they're not going to have the money to continue to pay that salary.
And we do actually have a child care representative talking with us through this series. So I like that you've mentioned that, because that was clearly a need that was identified through a lot of these projects, right?
Which is why some of those, particularly the child care centers and maybe the food assistance organizations or something, we focused on capital improvements. Mm-hmm. How can you expand the services and the care you give? And then, for instance, if you're a child care center, if you could expand by a classroom or two, you can then go higher, because you're going to be able to pay for those people by having 10 new kids there. That is a long-term solution, as opposed to just, hey, we'll pay for your employees for 3 years and then hopefully you'll figure it out, as opposed to losing that service. And that was a really tough one, because there were some really good projects you wanted to give money to, but we just knew in 3 years they were going to be back saying, we ran out of money. What now? And that wasn't a viable option for us.
Right. And you touched on some of the kind of challenges you've encountered along the way through this this process, and would love to hear a little bit more about your kind of major takeaways a year later, and including what you think you did right, because obviously that was a lot of money to deal with. I mean, a lot of decisions to be made, a lot of considerations there as far as applications go, and you even mentioned kind of multiple rounds of applications to really hone in on what might work and what wouldn't work, and timeline considerations, all of that good stuff. Touch on some of the things you think you really got right through this process.
Yeah, two of them I sort of touched on. One, I think the way we went about the process was right. We took our time. We didn't hurry it. We made sure everybody was involved in the conversations. We gave everyone an opportunity to talk and speak and provide input, which was essential to the process. Two, we really did focus on things that would last long-term, not short-term. My day job is I work for the League of Kansas Municipalities. I've seen a lot of cities who didn't do that, and now 2 years into it, they're starting to get worried. So Topeka got that right, which I'm very proud of. And again, that was a long-term conversation. I think the other thing we got right was making sure that we've put parameters on these dollars to make sure they get spent. So in January or February, we will do a review of all these applications. Okay. And we told everybody, if you are not going to spend it by the end of this year or have it committed, we might have to take it back, because if we don't, it goes right back to the feds. Mm-hmm. And I would hate to see this community lose $500,000 or $1 million simply because projects didn't go the way they thought or something changed within those projects. And then that money goes back to the federal government when we can take it back, even if it's working with that organization to spend it differently, but make sure it actually gets used in our community. And so that perimeter is a big one that I think we've got right.
That is such an important point too, is that this process, while we are a year later, is still very much ongoing. So Is there a framework yet for those who might listen to this to engage in that January, February timeline? More to come on that? What's the status?
No, our staff has been doing that follow-up, just checking in. And like I said, they've all been through each one had to sign a contract, and they were all told in January we'll be checking back in. They are also currently required to provide status reports quarterly to see how their project's going, so staff can look through those. And if there are any red flags, city staff can go in and say, whoa, wait, that is not how we thought it was going to go. Let's see if we can help you, because our goal is to help every one of those groups get it spent right. Our goal is not to take it away if they can't spend it.
Right.
We're going to work with them to make sure it can happen.
And that just seems so important with that's keep it local aspect, and not letting these funds potentially go to waste, because it can do a lot of good right here in Topeka. So that seems really big.
And Spencer, as Indy and I were preparing for this series, we took a look at all of the selected applications, if you can believe it. There are a lot, as you know.
Right.
And we observed a bit of a theme: childcare, housing, mental health. We know these topics are priorities for the community right now, as we've seen through discussions at City Council, them being included as key initiatives in plans like Momentum 2027, and so much more. Were these themes intentionally chosen by the committee and the governing body, or were they more coincidental, demonstrating maybe a deeper level of need in these certain areas more than we expected?
So yes and no. As I mentioned, the City Council said to us as one of their 2 requirements, focus on things of need in this community. And as you mentioned, we know those are areas of need, and they lead to other issues. But having people in housing not just helps with poverty, but crime and education and that child care and job development. That one piece leads to so many other pieces. And you can't do that. You can't be a productive household and feel safe if you don't have the child care component, if you want families to be able to exist in this community, right? And so we did absolutely look at, and then the mental health issue has a direct correlation to just not having a healthy community, but the homelessness issue that we're now all dealing with. So yes, we very much looked at what are root causes of issues in our community, and how can these dollars look at the root causes of those problems so that there's some long-term solutions and benefit to the whole city, as opposed to just, well, we hope this works, let's throw it around. So yes, we had many discussions about what are the root problems and can these dollars actually address those.
Right. And even that in itself seems very notable, because I think too often people view government entities as very reactionary, right? And it sounds like you guys were really trying to be proactive and look at those upstream issues, right, that are really impacting kind of the downstream elements of our community, of our business community, our populations, our families. So that's really important to point out, I feel like.
And I think that's one reason we took our time. That's a reason why this was a 8-month process. I mean, we could have done it, sure, had 2 meetings, made some decisions, but we really did meet regularly over a long period of time and engage with the community to make sure we were doing that the right way, as opposed to just kind of doing it really quick, which would have been easier. Trust me, it was stressful, and there were days where you're like, oh my gosh, this is very overwhelming. But I'm glad we took that time to
think it also shows that we're on the same page as a community, right? Like the government, kind of what India was getting at here a bit, is truly representing and working for the people. And I think that's exciting to see that the community's priorities are aligned really across the board. So hopefully these dollars can make long-term impact like you all set out to achieve.
Well, and we didn't have to take this $10 million. We could have put it all towards the infrastructure, which is very important. And I'm actually proud that we I know why we're not talking about it, but that other $35 million is going towards underserved areas of our city. We were very clear too as a council. I mean, I represent the West Side, but I've been very clear, and even some of my West Side council members have been said, no, we've got 100-year pipes in North Topeka, Oakland, East Topeka. That's where that money needs to go. Make sure that $35 million is going to the underserved areas for infrastructure projects. And so far it has, but we could have taken it all for infrastructure. And some of us wanted maybe 15 million instead of 10, but that's okay. That was one of the discussions we had, how much. So I also think the whole governing body and government gets some credit in this case of saying, we need to take a chunk of this and give it to the community, because they're going to do a lot of good with it. And so that was a decision that was also very important by the governing body, because not every community did that. And so I guess good for us. I hate patting ourselves on the back, but sometimes we do get it right, and it's okay to say so. And
right, definitely. And sometimes the right answer is not the easy answer, right? And so I think it says a lot that you guys took your time, that there were some hard discussions, maybe a little bit of compromise along the way, because, that's what leading is about, right? It's about figuring those out in the process and recognizing that we might not have everything figured out at this moment. So I respect that. Well, and, as Gretchen indicated, in this ARPA series we're putting together, we do plan to explore 3 of the selected projects in more detail with, I mentioned earlier, childcare being one. So one conversation will focus on childcare, another on housing, and a third on mental health, because those were really kind of some buckets, some themes we identified. And of course, these are very complex, important, timely issues that impact families, like we've said, businesses, our workforce, and really so much more. Would you help us shine a little bit more light on the potential progress you see Topeka making in these specific areas? And if you had to sum it up in a way, if you had to sum up the collective impact of that progress of these projects that are being funded through ARPA, what might that look like?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
A lot of pieces there.
No, I do think what those 3 areas not just represent 2 years ago as we started that ARPA process is that those are actually areas, if you look at the strategic planning that the council just did, are exactly identified in that strategic plan. If you look at recent conversations we've had about where to spend some excess dollars at the end of the year, those are actually exact areas we as a council have identified as needed in. We've passed in the last couple months a land bank program and housing trust fund fully funded to address the housing issue. The issue of mental health is right at the forefront, primarily of our homelessness issue, as we deal with that, because that is a key component of that homelessness problem. There's a lot of things I can do, but if I can't assist people with the mental health component, they're going to remain homeless, and I'm still going to not be really getting at the homelessness issue, right? And so I think it's added to those issues, complemented, I guess, those issues, but also highlighted the fact that those are primary issues we are still dealing with here a couple years later, but are focuses of the entire budget we've just passed and the entire grants process we're going through and anything, the prisms we're looking through, things at the city council. So progress is forthcoming, I think. I'm just as interested as everyone else when I get updates here in a few months on what these projects have been doing to see how they're coming to fruition. I mean, I think it's very exciting to see what they're going to do. And then I do think we have a responsibility to continue to work with these partners. It's not just here's a check, see you later, do a good job. Right. We don't need to reinvent the wheel as a city, and cities do that too often. We need to use these resources and say, how can I support your program in these areas more as a city so you can do your job? Because I'm not going to figure it out as a guy. I don't need to start all these programs. I just need to support the ones I have. Right. I think that's the holistic approach as we work through it, is just supporting what we've already got.
And that's such a great point, right? Because when you all approved these applications, for the most part, they were on pieces of paper. Right. They hadn't taken form. And I think part of the passion behind Indy and I having this conversation is it's been a little quiet on the ARPA front. We haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. And I think just now we're starting to see these things take form. Family Service and Guidance Center, who's going to be part of our childcare mental health focus. Yeah. They just had the grand opening.
Right. And some of that money went to that and helped kind of push them over that little hump.
Significant amount. So we're now able to say there is a space in the community, and ARPA dollars helped seal the deal, like you said. So we'll certainly be looking to mark some of those occasions and recognize that ARPA dollars had an impact.
Definitely. And I like that you point out too that this is not the end of the road, right? This is an ongoing community effort really to build up these programs, these offerings, these resources. And so this is a piece of the puzzle, but maybe there are still pieces out there that we need to explore as well.
Well, and you have to look at it that way, because you shouldn't, as city government, look at it and say, hey, we gave you some money, right? Figure it out. No. The money was great, but we also could use A, B, and C, and we need to provide that support. And so I want to know what the A, B, and C are besides just that we wrote you a check, now leave me alone.
Right.
That's the only way we're going to solve these issues and make any dent in it. I am not, as a city, going to go start a mental health facility.
Right.
It's not feasible. I've got those services here, so I hope these dollars are used correctly in the way we intended, and hope the next dollars we can give them.
And I'm sure some public-private partnerships are going to be crucial in that.
That's how it's going to have to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Spencer, we have so appreciated the insight you've shared with us today. As we wrap up the conversation, any final thoughts?
No, it was a heck of a process. And I think anyone who watched it, which was a lot of people, we probably had the most viewership of any council committee meetings we've ever had in the last at least 20 years on that issue, right? Because so many different people were watching every day. You could feel the eyes on you. And there was in the newspaper and the media a lot. Ooh, how are they going to spend these dollars? But I think most of the folks afterwards appreciated the process. I even had folks who were disappointed, who didn't get money, say, I get it, and thank you for walking us through why we didn't get it or what we could have done to move us forward. And actually, last thing I'll add is some of those who didn't get ARPA funds, through that process, we were actually able to connect them either with other city programs or other programs through the state that none of us knew existed. And so some of them actually got some additional funding through other programs because they participated in this process. So that was a win too.
Nice. Well, I think that sums it up perfectly. Spencer, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you, and it's been an honor having you on.
Thank you.
Thanks. And be sure to stay tuned because we'll be right back for a great conversation about how ARPA funds will impact childcare in Topeka.
In the studio with us now is Sarah Elsen, Executive Director of Child Care Aware of Eastern Kansas. Child Care Aware serves families in the state by helping people and communities find solutions to their child care needs. And it just so happens to be one of the more than 36 organizations in Topeka that have been awarded funds through the American Rescue Plan Act.
That's right. And with the availability of childcare being such a hot topic lately, we wanted to dive in further to learn how those ARPA funds will impact childcare resources in the area. But first, let's learn a bit more about Child Care Aware of Eastern Kansas. Sarah stepped into the organization's executive director role in August, following the retirement of longtime director Riva Waiwatis. We're thrilled to have Sarah joining us today to share more about Child Care Aware and the broader topic of childcare in Topeka and Shawnee County.
Yes, Sarah, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
And now, before we get to all things ARPA, and for those who don't know, give us a brief overview of the services Child Care Aware provides and an idea of who you serve.
We serve 33 counties in Kansas, so we serve the eastern part of the state, and we provide technical assistance, support, resources to families and providers that are serving children from that 0 to 5 year age range.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Now, we know childcare has been identified really as a priority focus for the community. Many different initiatives I know are in discussions or taking it on, including Momentum 2027, our latest 5-year community strategy, which of course is kind of organized here by the GTP and its community partners. So it's clearly top of mind for a lot of people right now. What are some challenges that childcare providers are really facing in Topeka and Shawnee County? What do you want people to know about these challenges? Can you shed some light on that for us?
So for the providers, it's really the recruitment and retention of the teachers and those that want to go into the early childhood field. You know, childcare is really expensive for families to pay, but it's even more expensive for providers to have that operations. And you think about all of the resources that they need. You know, they need, if they're doing a center, they need a facility, all the overhead costs for that. But a home provider too, they need to get, you know, toys and playground equipment and different things like that. So you go into child care because you have a passion for it, you love it, it's in your blood. It's not something that you go into to make money and get rich off of. Right. It's because you really want to provide a better future for our youth.
And how do you think we address some of those challenges?
I think a big thing is we need to get partners involved. You know, this is a bottleneck that those of us in childcare has seen coming for years and years, but it was something that was really magnified and brought to light during the COVID pandemic. A lot of providers lost their jobs or shut their doors during that pandemic because families were working from home and they were keeping their children home, and it just wasn't sustainable. So that really kind of brought all of these issues to light. But I think it's getting partners involved like GTP. We need to get businesses involved. They need to look at it as a benefit. In order to recruit and retain their employees, they have to have childcare in the community that they're working in to take their children, and not just childcare, but high quality childcare.
Right. And I love that you point that out because there's clearly kind of an economic component to all of this, right? Workforce component. And with talent attraction being such a big issue at the moment for so many communities, there's some real overlap there.
Absolutely. That was such an important perspective you shared about how the pandemic really shined a light on some of these issues. So thank you. And we know Child Care Aware was one of the many community organizations to receive ARPA funding through the City of Topeka's ARPA funds grant process. We understand Child Care Aware was allocated $500,000 to expand child care services. How exactly will those funds be used to expand those services? And are some of those expansion efforts already underway?
We have been working on the expansion efforts, and those dollars specifically awarded to us are to expand infant and toddler slots, but also the non-traditional hour slots. So, you think of childcare as typically kind of that 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. time slot, where the typical Monday through Friday worker is taking their children to childcare. But especially in the Topeka community, we have a lot of manufacturing jobs, a lot of jobs that are 7 days a week, 24-hour operations. And where are those children going? We have such a great need for those non-traditional hours as well.
The second, third shift opportunities.
Yeah, but infant and toddler is a great need as well. Childcare providers really don't start breaking even or start making money until that child kind of reaches that 3-year age mark. Before then, because of the ratios of the staff to the children, because infants and toddlers require a lot more eyes on them and hands on them, the ratio is a lot higher. So it's more expensive to take the infant and toddlers. So a lot of providers, aren't wanting to take them. It's easier for them to have more slots and less staff to have those older children. And so we're finding that families are putting their names on a waiting list before they even get pregnant, just because in order for them to return to work when their parental leave is over, they need a safe place to take their children. And unfortunately, a lot of times they don't have some place to take their children.
So how does this expansion look? Is it wages being passed down to help recruit and later retain top talent for some of these needs in the infant and early years? Or how does this apply, and what can we see it really look like?
So it is to recruit a lot of new providers to get into the field of childcare and take those infant and toddlers and, help supplement some of that loss that they have in the startup funds of, what they need for those infant and toddlers, because it is a lot more cost prohibitive to take those infant and toddlers, but also to do the non-traditional hours. Everybody wants to work a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. job. And so really recruiting those providers that are willing to, take children on the weekends, to have them overnight. I talked a little bit about manufacturing, but you also think how we have Forbes Field here. And we have the National Guard, and they need to do 1 weekend a month of reserve work. Where are they going to take their children if we don't have the childcare slots for them to take them? And that's such an important need that we have. We need to have our military operating. We need to keep them trained. So they need to be able to have safe, quality, reliable childcare as well.
And another follow-up question on that note, how does this take form? Will you all have your own defined application process for those who are interested in starting up a childcare program of their own? Or how does this look for those who might be listening and interested in taking advantage of some of the ideas and efforts that you guys are doing with these ARPA funds?
So we have a project coordinator who is working specifically on this grant. That is the only thing that she does. So she is supporting the childcare providers who are interested in this. She's helping them navigate the licensing process, what is needed. She's helping them navigate the funding that's available for them. She's educating them on childcare and the infant and toddler slots and the non-traditional hours. So we have one designated person who is working specifically with these providers on navigating everything from startup to opening their doors to take these children.
That's great.
Right. And, you touched on the ARPA funds in particular and how those will be kind of used. I know that's being, used in conjunction with some other grants you guys may have been awarded recently as well. Are there facility expansion components to all of this? What does that piece look like?
So we also have been awarded the accelerator grant that actually GTP is the fiscal agent for, but Child Care Aware of Eastern Kansas is doing the work for.
Okay.
It's a little bit over $3 million. And so the ARPA dollars for the City of Topeka is just operational cost, where this one includes construction and operational cost. This is more for the centers, where the City of Topeka ARPA dollars is more for those in-home family providers. So we're looking about expanding about 500 slots just in the Topeka, Shawnee County greater community. This needs to be done by December of 2024. So it is a pretty tight project when you think about we have to do construction and open up some of these centers. We are still recruiting projects that are interested in that. So please, if you're interested, reach out. But it's a really exciting time for our area to expand. You think just 500 slots just with that grant plus the ARPA dollars to do the City of Topeka infant, toddler, and non-traditional hours.
That is incredible. And I'm glad that you kind of broke the difference in the funding mechanisms down for us and how those will be applied in different ways. And of course, you touched on some of the challenges that childcare providers are experiencing and the challenges of childcare in our community currently. Talk to us a little bit about the expansion efforts versus the need and how that relates to some of the challenges you mentioned. I mean, will these expansion efforts bridge the current gap that exists completely or that are undoubtedly contributing to the challenges you've already mentioned? Shed some light on that for us.
The slots will not take care of the need that we have. We have a much greater need than just expanding these slots. Unfortunately, we are losing childcare providers faster than we can onboard and recruit new ones. You think about the wages that childcare providers are making, and they are making kind of between that starting wage of $10 to $15 an hour. And you can go work, someplace else and make a lot more that has benefits. A lot of childcare providers don't get benefits. And so that's why a lot of people are really choosing to leave the childcare field, but it is such a vital need. What they are doing and what they're doing to help educate and formulate these building blocks of these children is going to take them lifelong. And so really having a passion for it and knowing that you aren't just a daycare provider that's just taking these children, but you're providing educational opportunities for them, we really need to value them and know what a great job that they're doing taking care of our children all day long.
Right. And I just want to kind of reiterate something you just said there. The ripple effects of all of this, I think, is really important to kind of recognize because, people leaving the profession at a greater rate has much more longer term consequences than some might realize.
Definitely.
Yeah. And thank you for that, Sarah. ARPA allocations have been coined once in a lifetime funds. We've heard that phrase a lot of times in coverage related to ARPA in the process. From the perspective of an agency who received funding, what doors have these dollars opened for you all at Child Care Aware? Any doors or opportunities that we haven't yet touched on today?
I think it's really helped bring a light onto the need that we have and given us an opportunity like this podcast today to shed light onto the need and to talk to partners, businesses, the community, our legislature about their involvement. And now, yes, this may have been a once in a lifetime thing that helped us bridge some of these needs, but what it's going to take for us all coming together now to continue this initiative and solve this problem.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, speaking more broadly and kind of longer term here, as we look ahead, 5+ years from now, what do you hope care for children and families and the availability of childcare in general will look like for Topeka and Shawnee County?
I hope that families are not expanding their family based on childcare and quality childcare. I hope that they can expand it because they are ready as a family to expand it and know that they are going to be able to go out and find a childcare provider that they trust to help raise their children. Mm-hmm. I hope that as a community and an economic viability, that businesses look at this, that this needs to be a benefit that we offer our employers or our employees coming. Mm-hmm. We may be trying to recruit someone from another state or another community, but unless they have childcare that they can immediately move their children into, that's going to be a barrier for them coming to Topeka.
That's a great point.
And I think that really speaks to population growth, right? And recruiting people to come live in our community and sharing how great of a community we have. It's important. Obviously, we've got to have those childcare spots. And then also, like you mentioned, people who are considering growing their own family here in Topeka and Shawnee County. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that population growth because Indy and I have taken a look at that in several of our past episodes. And it's always apparent to me how often these issues really intersect and become a broader community approach.
And to that point too, I think it is important to be on the same page, right, about all of this, because if we're working in our silo to attract people and bring people to the community, but the resources aren't there to support their move to the community, that's a big deal. So I'm really glad we're having these conversations and really connecting the dots for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if it's just connecting for me. Right. And Sarah, as we close out our conversation today, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I think childcare is such an important thing for our families, for our community, for everyone involved. And I'm just so glad that so many partners are coming together and seeing this important need and doing what needs to be done to address it.
Definitely. Well, Sarah, we so appreciate you for joining us in the studio today for this show and for all the important work you do, your organization does for our community, for Northeast Kansas. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.
You can catch new episodes of Topeka Talk Community Conversations the first week of each month.